So welcome everybody to the second of the recent Women in Geospatial webinars. We had one last week as well, which you can find. I think we have a recording going up soon. But I'm so pleased to be presenting this one today, which I think is a really interesting topic. First of all, to introduce myself, my name is Abigail Page. I'm on the Women in Geospatial Steering Group Committee. And I guess the reason that I'm so interested in being involved is that I really think that the way that we use geospatial to understand our world and the things around us really has the power to do a lot of good and change society. But in order to do that, I think that we need to make sure that we're building on the foundations of a really diverse and inclusive profession and groups of organisations. So I'm really keen to support the work from women in geospatial and also kind of diversity and inclusion activities in our profession. In my day job, I work for the Geospatial Commission in UK government as international advisor, and I know that inclusivity is certainly something that we strive for in our work in the UK too. The topic of the discussion today is about growing confidence in professional confidence in geospatial. So thinking about, I guess for me, thinking about our profession, there's some really amazing stories, some great breadths of work and activity going on. I'd really like to see people stepping forward a little bit more. So whether that's going to be speaking at events or being our next leaders or politicians with that geospatial background, I think it does us all good to kind of develop our confidence and put ourselves forward into new challenging situations and roles. It's not always the easiest thing to do. So we're going to discuss today with some of our panelists about their experiences of when they've had to put themselves into more challenging situations, how they've done that, and some of the learnings that they've had on their journey. Before we kick off though, just a few more introductions. So I want to introduce Alina, who is co-chairing with me today and is operating our Q&A and Slido and saving me trying to do too many windows at once. So thank you, Alina. Alina is a geospatial and Earth observation professional and a space enthusiast, she tells me. She works at Affinity Water in the UK, but she is also, I know, really passionate about our industry. She's editor at Maplines, which is the British Cartographic Society magazine, membership manager at the Space Generation Council at the UN, and also on the Women in Geospatial Committee. So thanks, Alina, for your support, and I know you'll keep us straight today. Let me talk a little bit about Women in Geospatial, and then we will introduce our panelists. So the Women in Geospatial Network's been going for just over a year now, and it's really about creating a strong network of change makers, as I've said in my intro. And we do that through a number of different ways. We have community building, we have a really active Slack channel and kind of discussion groups going. We run a number of events, or we also participate in events that others are running. If you're interested in having a speaker at something you're doing, please let us know. We run a mentorship program. I believe the next round of mentorship will start in September, so there'll be some information about people that might want to get involved. And we also kind of advocate for diversity in the industry. Please visit the website and find out a little bit more about what we do. Something super exciting that we have done last week, we launched the Women in Geospatial Plus Speakers database. Please take a look. Here's your first action, I guess, about gaining some confidence and being a little bit brave. Put yourself forward for that database. And if you're looking for speakers for events or people to contribute to work that you're doing, it's a really good resource and place to visit. And those number of pinpoints and entries are growing day by day. here's how to follow us. I guess the main entry point is via our website, but we are also very active on social media and other channels too. So let's move on to today's session. As I said, about how to gain professional confidence. And let me just do a really quick intro to some of our speakers, and they're going to say something about themselves as well, which lets me off the hook because there's some really long and interesting bios about what everyone's been doing. Let me start with oh, you can't see my slides. Oh,
exactly,
okay.
Abby, exactly. This was I wanted to tell you. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Let me, can you see my slides now? You can see them now. Okay. Let me just go back so you got that link. So, Women in Geospatial Database and the website. So you can take a note of that website and join us. There we go. Thank you for that, Alina. I told you were going to keep me straight. So here we go. So let's start with some intros, and let's start with Esther. Esther is the country manager for Sambas Geospatial Limited in Nigeria, and in her role, she's managing a team developing geospatial solutions and understanding the benefits of geospatial. I know that Esther is also serving as the secretary for African women in GIS. And she says that sometimes she'd rather be typing behind the screens than on screen, but we're really pleased that you're on screen today, Esther. Do you want to say something a little bit about your work, what brought you into Geo, just in a couple of short minutes?
Thank you very much, Abigail. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I think my audio is having a bit of a problem earlier. Okay, great. Thank you very much, Abigail. Thank you, Alina. I'm glad to be here. Like I said, well, I would rather be typing away, but thankfully I'm here today, and it's a good thing I'm here. So my name is Esther, as Abigail said. I work in the private sector in the geospatial industry. I've been in the geospatial industry for about 6 years now, but a little over a year for a career. I didn't start working professionally in GIS till sometime last year. So I've had about a bit over a year experience. But before that, I've been able to work in several other sectors in managing teams. And like you rightly said, I also am the secretary for the African Women in GIS. We're a community of African women around the world who either study, work, or just simply enthusiastic about geospatial industry. So it's a community that helps women to be themselves, network, create opportunities, share opportunities. It's diverse. So I'll be happy to talk a bit more about them later on today. Thank you.
Thanks, Esther. And let's go to Rahini. Rahini is currently working as an emergency specialist with UNICEF in New York, although I think I heard you say earlier you're not in New York right now, but focusing on risk monitoring and analysis. I hear that you also have an interest in how you apply technology to disaster, environmental risks, but enjoy hiking volcanoes, which I thought was an interesting combination of professional and personal interest. Rahini, do you want to say something further about yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you, Abigail, and thank you to Men in Geospatial for having me here. It's such a pleasure. So I'm from a small town in South India, and growing up, it was ravaged by any disasters you can imagine, cyclones, and then the tsunami happened. And most often than not, the only explanation you would hear in villages in South India is that it was God's wrath, or there will always be a superstitious belief around it. So I think I took it upon myself to learn a bit more about what's happening, and that's how I ended up in this field. Both my bachelor's, master's, everything is in geospatial, and I think that's how I make sense of the world around me, and it's quite interesting. The reason why I find it contradicting is that I myself like hiking active volcanoes, ignoring all the risks that I preach about. So that kind of gives me an overview on how it is easy to ignore risk in general. So, but yep, glad to be discussing more about my passion and career so far.
Great, thanks. Thanks, Rohini, and welcome. And then we'll go to Denise. So Denise is an international geospatial professional and co-director currently at the Benchmark initiative that operates through Geovation, which is a geospatial innovation centre in the UK run by Ordnance Survey. And I know Denise is doing some really interesting work at the moment on guidance for the ethical use of location data, so very topical. I know, Denise, that we were both on the board of the Association for Geographic Information in the UK, and Denise is now chairing that board, that national committee, and is also on the advisory board for the Location-Based Marketing Association. Denise, I think in terms of how professional confidence goes, moving halfway around the world has to be kind of one of those steps that maybe we'll pick up a bit more later. But do you want to say something else?
Sure, Abby, sure. And I should say that Abby, there's some very big shoes I had to fill when Abby was the previous chair of AGI as well. So she left me with the amazing position to take on there too. Look, I fell really into geospatial 20 years ago. I don't think I even understood what the word meant until I got hauled into a director's office in the Victorian government. And this guy kind of spent 45 minutes talking to me about projection systems and Earth observations and using maps for all of these incredible things. And I kind of got to the end of it and said, oh, sounds really interesting, but does it come with a dictionary to explain most of what you've just talked about? And that was kind of the real, I guess, the beginning of what's been an amazing career in this space. And, you know, everything that I've done, I've learned a bit more. You know, so I think one of the great, amazing, rich things about the geospatial community is just that there is always something new to learn. There is always some new way that you can apply this to change the world, to make it better. And I think that the incredible gift, I guess, of being part of this is you just get to meet so many people that make a really incredible difference in the world too. So yes, accent-wise, you can hear I come from Melbourne, Australia. I now live in Winchester, UK, and I've done that for 7 years. I did insanely pick up my whole family when my youngest was 3 years old and my oldest was 5, and moved from Melbourne to the UK. Happy to share some wisdom on that one. Also the insanity of doing such things as well. But I guess what I would say is that these things are achievable. And so I think, you know, particularly as a female, I think sometimes we look at those sorts of changes, those moves around the world as being something that's not attainable if we're a parent, you know, and I'm not sure that that's always the case. So I think that confidence thing really does come into that, of sort of thinking, well, maybe I could give it a go. So I think for today, I was excited to kind of join this discussion because I'm not sure that we actually have enough of these dialogues, if you like, about how we help people to feel more confident to take on new things. So I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Thanks, Denise, and thanks for your kind words as well. And last but not least, Stephen, do a little bit for gender balance on the panel today. It's usually the other way around, but it's great to have you join us. Thank you. Stephen leads the external relationships at GEO, so the group on Earth observations based out of Geneva in Switzerland. But Stephen, you've had a career across a whole load of international and really kind of exciting, interesting roles, from kind of company owner and director to you know, executive director roles on OGC, etc. So I'm pretty sure you're a familiar figure in our industry anyway. You originally hail not far from me, but you certainly travelled a little bit further than I have in my career journey. So I'm sure you'll have some interesting insights today. Do you have anything else you want to offer in terms of intro?
Yeah, I mean, I think the other thing that distinguishes me is probably my age as well. I've been working a little bit longer, I think, than some of the people here. I studied information systems in the 80s, and then I actually started my career working for the National Shipping Line of Singapore. So I left Scotland in the early 90s to go and live there, and then I've kind of traveled all around ever since. So kind of similar to Denise, I describe myself as an accidental geographer, because I actually joined a company that was initially that was working on marine survey and satellite positioning services for oil and gas. And that was kind of my entry point into the location sector. So now, as of today, I've probably spent about 27 or 28 years in the geospatial domain. After, I mean, I spent 10 years at One Spatial, and then after that, I kind of purposely change roles every 3 to 4 years, just to kind of like, I guess, improve my own learning, but to step out of my comfort zone a little bit as well. So I've worked a lot in both public and private sector. I've led teams, departments, and organizations. And I've also hired or been involved in hiring probably more people than I can remember. So probably, I guess the most important thing is that I've watched a lot of things change. Like we can now talk more openly about physical health, mental health, aging parents, sick children, and all of that I think is for the better. And I think that's really what I've seen is that in the geospatial domain, it's so broad, but it's actually, I find it a very accepting community. So I find that it's a very open community and that people are very willing to work with you irrespective of, you know, nationality, gender, whatever. So that's my little piece.
Great. Thank you so much. And like I said, we're all, I think we're all pleased to be on the meeting today, but thanks for giving up your time to come and speak with us. As I said, we want to make this really interactive. So there's what kind of 6 of us here, but apparently there's hundreds watching in. So if you're watching, we really do want you to get involved. We have like a really quick poll to get us going. Alina, if you can make that live. Let's see if I can share that on my screen. Can you still see my screen? Hopefully. So the question is, for the audience, which of the following situations would you find most intimidating? For example, applying for a new role or opportunity, just general networking at conferences. I know that can be quite hard, just how to introduce yourself when there's a closed group of people having a chat around a sandwich, I guess. Public speaking, leading a team, maybe for the first time, or maybe a new team. Being seen as the expert, I guess sometimes that can be quite challenging, or something else. If it's something else, tell us in the questions. So let's have a look how it's going. We've got 68, 72 votes are still coming in, but I guess like the ones that are coming out near the top are there, the networking at conferences and being seen as the expert. Should we just start with the general one about general networking? Like how have you managed to build up a kind of network? How do you get started? How do you introduce yourself to people? Did somebody want to offer to kick us off, or shall I pick on somebody?
I see Denise
even you like
is about to give us.
I'm sure I can probably say something about this one.
Okay.
So most people who know me well would assume that this is a really natural thing for me. And I'm always really surprised when I say to them that I would never have said boo to a goose until I was about 14 years of age. So I think when it comes to networking at conferences, it's a really learned art. I think some people have got a very natural capability to walk up to a stranger. My daughter has that in spades. She just walks up to everybody and has a conversation. But I think that to get yourself over the nerves, it's kind of like it's almost like riding a bike. You just have to keep on going and putting yourself out and doing it. So finding, you know, every situation you go in, really kind of put yourself into a situation where you just go and say hi to somebody, you know, ask them why they came to the event. You know, I have mentored a couple of people now, and in talking with them, some of the things that I've said are, even come up with 5 questions that you've just always got in the back of your head that are nice general ones, but you know are ones you can just pull straight out to sort of ask someone to start up a conversation. Because I think sometimes that's the scariest bit, is just thinking of something to say to somebody that you haven't met before. So I think sometimes having that sort of just 3 to 5 questions of things that you might want to know about somebody that's always in the back of your head will immediately give you something to share in there. But I think also remember that so many people are totally freaked out by the idea of networking too. So you're certainly not the only one in a conference situation that is like that as well, would be what I would say.
Esther, I know you've got quite a background in kind of running things in the creative and tech industry before geospatial as well. Have you had experiences where you've had to go into a room of people that you don't know and introduce yourself, and have you got any thoughts on that?
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. There's something that I say to a few of my friends. For me, confidence is like a mask you wear when you have to go out. Not everybody, like Denise says, not everybody has it natural. It's something you have to learn how to do, right? So when I know I have to go make a presentation or talk to people or go to network, it's like a mask I pick by the door, wear it on, and wear my smiley face, right? Something I know that has worked over time is, like Denise said, about having 3 to 5 questions. Oftentimes, because you feel a little uncomfortable talking about yourself, it's usually easier to ask people about themselves when you meet them. So you go, oh, hi, what do you do? It takes the pressure off of you. So you're not forced to talk about yourself, which you're scared about. And I think when the conversation kind of gets going, it's a lot easier for you to share. So I think that's something that has worked.
That's great.
So,
Stephen, you're a serial networker. You must have some experiences you can share.
yeah, I was going to say, unfortunately for me, I love networking and I love public speaking. I'm kind of like a random rare fish. But because I receive a lot of people coming to me who are very nervous and who quite often think because I'm older and I'm more senior that I'm unapproachable. And so I think if you do a couple of things, like typically you're at the same event and you're all there for a specific topic. So, you know, picking on like maybe a speech someone said or something that might have been controversial or something that was really interesting, I think using that as a kind of a hook to open up a conversation is really quite good. What I find a little bit bizarre, and I'll say this because I have, you know, quite a few number of followers on Twitter, is when people just come up to me and say, hey, I follow you on Twitter. And it's kind of like, oh, okay. You know, so thinking like Esther and Denise have said, have a bit more structure to what you're saying. Don't be too random with what you're saying. Try and like find the theme and talk around it.
Yeah, Rahini, what about you? Have you got any thoughts?
If I would have taken this poll, probably that's the one I would have chosen. On the contrary, I absolutely hated networking at conferences, and especially when I was a student and I had to go to a conference, I was always a bit insecure, and I would overthink it, that people are gonna think that I'm coming to them just because I have an agenda to talk to them, and that kind of pushed me back from talking to anybody. So I was always in the back of the room and not going or putting me out there. But then I started becoming a bit more strategic about how I go about this. Before going to a conference, I would go through the speaker list and try to find people whom I really want to talk about and what I want to talk about. So I started preparing, like researching a bit more. It's a bit too much for just attending a conference, but I think that's the only way I could break those barriers that I had as a student to growing up in the professional ladder, to go into a conference and say, okay, approach somebody. And then it came step by step as an ease, that when somebody's standing by during a social event or something, I could make some small talk, and it grew over time, but it took a long time before I was comfortable. And I can't still say I'm quite comfortable now, but better than before. So it's hard work.
Stephen, you have something to add?
Yeah, I mean, you quite often what you get with events is you get a list of the speakers and presenters from different themes and topics. So I think you can do a bit of homework and you can look at, you know, who do you really want to talk to and target them, so you know where they're from, what they're doing, what they're presenting on. I think that can actually be quite complimentary if you can go up to someone and say, oh, I've read about your bio and, you know, I know this and stuff like that. I've done that a lot. You call me a serial or whatever you called me. But I've done that a lot through my career, and it works really well.
It was definitely a kind comment, I promise. But yeah, I think that's a really good tip from Rahini as well, is to maybe not overthink it, but a little bit of preparation before. Like I guess I've always thought that even a couple of connections is a good meeting. So am I still? I look like I've frozen out a little bit. There we go. Alina, what was the second popular or the other popular responses to the poll?
Is exactly what we have here, being seen as the expert.
Okay,
and
so
that as well. So I think this makes you a little bit unapproachable, and you feel like you don't want to show that.
Yeah, or under pressure sometimes to be the expert on all things, maybe. Rahini, you're nodding. Is that something that you found in your career or your teams at UNICEF?
Yes, absolutely. In almost all the jobs I have worked so far, mainly because I'm not in an agency which is dedicated to this. So I automatically become the expert because I'm just bringing this specialized skill into an agency that is focusing on something completely different. So even in meetings, all of a sudden people will be, oh, but we have our expert here. And then you have this little crunch inside yourself saying, oh, that's probably not me. I wouldn't call myself an expert. But then I would have to think the way the word expert is being used in the context, not necessarily as a postdoc researcher having specific skills, but you know something specialized in that context more than anybody else there. So when I started understanding in that perspective, I become a bit more comfortable being called as the expert. But I constantly had struggle to accept myself. Okay, I'm the expert in this field, and this is my thing. I need to own up to it. But that's a crucial thing to do. That builds your confidence a lot. Over to you.
I quite like that. It's not necessarily that you're like the best expert in your field, but you're expert in comparison to the group where you're asked to present, or the group that you're in. And Denise, you must have found yourself in some situations where you're presenting geospatial to some kind of interesting groups of people, and having to kind of stand up there and present in different situations. Have you got some thoughts on being seen as the expert, and how do you manage that?
Yeah, so what I would say in the early part of my, so if you take, I worked for OGC for 6 years or so. I think in the first couple of years that I was there, I constantly felt like I was under pressure to always have the answer. So when you get up and do a presentation and people ask you questions at the end, because they thought you were the expert, it was really good when I had a colleague pull me aside after one of the conferences and said, you can say that you don't know. Like, that's actually totally fine. Like, just because you know a lot about a field, no one actually knows everything about any particular topic. And so actually, if we go back to kind of the topic here on confidence, actually, it's a really important thing to work out that you don't always have to have an answer to the question that's there. You can say, I don't know the exact answer to that. I can know how to get it, or I know a person who will have the answer to that, and I can connect you to them. But I think sometimes we pull a lot of pressure onto ourselves to try and come up with an answer to all situations because we're being seen as that expert. So I think it was a really important step for me to kind of realize, actually, I could honestly look at people and say, look, I'm not actually the expert in that particular thing, but I can probably work out what the answer is, or who would be able to answer that in there. It was a useful kind of progression in my career when I realized that one.
Yeah, and I guess it kind of feeds back onto the last one about like networking, and actually sometimes being able to point to other people that you know that might be able to help. And I think as your career progresses, that does become a little bit easier. You're a little bit clearer about who you can rely on, ask for help and things as well. So what else came up in the poll, Alina? Is there something else that we should cover?
Yes, so just seeing all the questions. So 45% being seen as an expert, 43% as networking at conferences, but also public speaking is 38% from 128 respondents. So public speaking as well, it's something we find as intimidating, and I have to say that I'm there as well. So that's one of my answers, because although I've run this type of webinars, when it comes to public speaking, then I found that the COVID period showed me that I can do it as well, and is one of my positives from all this lockdown. So I do tend to see public speaking more approachable now, but before it was something challenging for me. And I see also 39% people now consider public speaking intimidating. Looking towards leading a team, 17% of our respondents said that is intimidating, leading a team, so becoming that manager. So even stepping up from an analyst, from a specialist, and now you go towards managing a team, people consider that is not approachable, so they will tend to reject this position. And will be good to see our panelists feedback on public speaking and leading a team, please.
Great. Does someone want to pick up first on the one about public speaking? Yeah, go ahead, Stephen.
So there's a couple of, I mean, I started my public speaking career when my parents had the first privately run training centre for people with learning disabilities in Scotland. And the first minister of Scotland came, and there was like maybe 200 people, and my parents said, Stephen, can you just go and say a few words? And I was like, what? It's like the first minister of Scotland, and you've just spent 3 years and raised £1 million to do this. And they're like, yeah, but you're good at this kind of stuff. And I think that was my entry into public speaking, and so that was like quite an entry, and I think I've no nerves since because of that. There's a couple of things I've learned along the way. One of them, which comes from TED Talks, is ABC, audience before content. So what a lot of people do is they put together a presentation slide and they say what they want to say, but they don't necessarily think about who's going to hear what they're going to say. So that's kind of a golden rule for me, is think about what you want to say and what the message is and who the audience is before you start putting it together. And then the golden rule, practice, practice, practice. The amount of times I see people on planes or other places, and I used to do it, I don't do it anymore, who are last minute preparing presentations. If you practice it and you go through it, it's incredible how much difference it makes to your confidence, because you know what's in there. And I think the final bit would be, I don't like the term expert, because I don't think anybody's ever an expert. You're always learning. We're always continuously learning. But if you've done something yourself, and if you know the results and the outcomes, and you've been the person involved in that work, you know that better than anyone. So you shouldn't be nervous about questions, because you know it inside out. So those would be kind of the things that I would say from a public speaking perspective can help you with your confidence and with your kind of approach to doing it.
Stephen, a question's just come in asking about if you're not entirely confident about speaking in English, or you feel like your English is a little bit broken, I think the question said, like, how can you get over that when you're giving a presentation? And I said, that's you have a strange accent, but your English is good, Stephen. But from your experience of being at international conferences, I guess as listening to presentations, like for me as an audience participant, it's not something that puts me off listening to that person or that content. I mean, do you have any kind of thoughts about how that works?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing for me is I would never ever think about someone presenting in English when it's not their mother tongue and kind of condescending or making fun or anything, because I've presented in French several times. And it's really hard. And when I do that, I say, this is not my mother tongue, so please bear with me. And even doing something as simple as that sets the context and people understand. And sometimes I make a joke saying, I'd kind of like to see you do the same thing in Scottish. But, we know Scottish is a language for us. But I think sort of breaking the ice a little bit is good for you, and it's good for the audience, just to show that you're kind of at ease with what you're doing. That's the hard part, is showing that you're natural. And you know, I prefer presenting to 5,000 people than to 50, because you always get the nitpickers in the 50 who go off down some track and ask you some random question that's not associated with what you do. So I think it's all about it is about that confidence. It's about, but finding a way that you're happy with to set your own confidence level. So is that having, you know, running through it beforehand with someone, or is it doing something, you know, don't make it a bad joke. Don't make it a joke that's going to die. But, you know, just something to break the ice gently, I think, is important.
Esther, you're nodding. Did you, or sorry, then we'll come to Rahini. Esther, did you want to add something about speaking?
Yeah, it was when he mentioned something about knowing your stuff. I think that's a pretty big one. If you have to do public speaking, you have to know your stuff, because if you know it, you won't be scared of questions, which is what a lot of people are worried about when they have to do public speaking. They're scared of the feedback, scared of the questions they'll be asked, and that sort of thing. But if you know what you want to speak about, I think it goes a long way in making your nerves relax a little bit, and make everybody know that you're not perfect, you're not the expert, you're just sharing what you know. So I think that helps.
And Rahini, you had something to add, I think.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to the question, when English is not your first language, and it's not mine. So 10 years ago, I couldn't say 2 sentences right away. And that's when I moved from India to the US and took up grad studies in completely English speaking context. There are a couple things I did that really helped me. And one is I forced myself to think in English. So when I was by myself walking or something, I always thought in my mother tongue, but I kept forcing myself to start thinking in English so that it was easier for me to say the words, because sometimes I would know in my mother tongue and it would take time to translate it. And that gave me the nervous feeling when I was talking to others. And one of the things, it might be funny now, but I binge watched Friends because I knew the English words, but I couldn't hold a conversation. I didn't know conversational English. So I took up a very easy show, something really, really funny, and something that I could hear over and over again. And funny enough, I still use a lot of phrases that I learned in France. So things like this, consciously making that effort to move from this thinking in the mother tongue and being a bit self-conscious about how I pronounce the word, or is there a grammatical mistake. And it really helped when I met people like either whose first language was English or who studied English all their life, and they still did make some grammatical errors. So it's just part and parcel of the language. So those things kind of helped me build my confidence, and it took me a couple of years before I could start speaking well. If that helps.
Thank you, Rohini. Just touching on the questions on Slido, people are interested, just going back to networking, they're interested to know some examples from you when networking. So examples of questions.
An example question. Maybe we can do a round robin, and each person can quickly say one question that you would ask a stranger at a conference networking. To get the conversation started or to find out something about them. Denise, can I pick on you? Have you got an example question?
I always ask people why they've come to the conference. So, you know, finding out what their motivation was to be there.
Why are you here? Yeah, Stephen?
So, yeah, I think I go back to what I was saying earlier. You know, if they're a presenter, then sort of dive into some of the topics and the content from the presentation. And then if not, I think Denise's question is perfect.
Esther, have you got an example?
I think two things I usually do is, the first will be, what do you do? So if, say, maybe I see them at a booth, and I know the name of their companies, oh, what do you do for this company? And the second thing will be, if there are like panel discussions, breakout sessions and stuff, I would ask, oh, which of the sessions are you going for? It's a great way to start the conversation going, because you find out, oh, they're going for the same thing as you are. And it's like, oh, let's tag along. And then the conversation gets going.
And Rahini, have you got an example question?
If you have broken the ice with the questions that was just suggested, one of the things I would ask is advice. People like giving advices, especially if I find somebody in a mid-level or senior role. I always ask them, do you have any advice for somebody, you know, who's in an early career? And I enjoy those conversations.
Thank you.
There's at least 5 or 6 questions, Alina, that people can think about and write down.
Yes, exactly. One of the questions I find here interesting on Slido is from Helen. I quite often attend events with male colleagues and people assume I'm their junior, but I'm in fact their manager. I think the question just moved. So do you have any advice on how to deal with this?
So I have a similar experience. I have this happened recently. I have someone in my team who's a climate expert, and she was giving the talk and I was there supporting her, and someone came up and said, you know, oh, Stephen, blah, blah, blah. I said, no, stop. I'm only here supporting. She's the expert. Go and speak to her. And I think that has to be something that has to also come. I think that has to be a discussion between the team, that this situation might arise and that you need support from each other if that happens. I think that's really important.
Exactly. Showing support, it is one of the main priorities as well for our counterparts. Yes, questions are coming in and they are voted by our attendees. One of them is how you follow up on networking done at the conference. After the networking, how you start that email and reintroduce yourself.
So you've gone back. You've got the business cards, or you found them on LinkedIn. What do you do? Where do you go from there? Denise, have you got some? Oh, sorry, Esther, you had your hand.
Okay. So I think that's kind of interesting. A habit I built over the years is when I meet people and I get their business cards, during the conversation, I make it a habit to make a note behind the business card about what we were talking about. So say if we're talking about a project the person worked on or an interest they had in what I do or something I want to talk about with them later on, I just make a note behind the business card, because usually after those conferences, you get back home or get back to your hotel room and you have a stack of business cards and you don't remember half of what you've discussed. So I think that's really, really helped me. So when I get back and I travel back to my country and I decide to send the email, I take each business card, look at the back, I'm like, oh yeah, this is the guy I talked to about this project in South Africa. And I type a mail based on that to either rehash or follow up or send an information I promised to send, that sort of thing. It helps.
Yes, thank you. And now I think because I stopped the poll, you can see the questions coming in on Abby's shared screen. So these are the questions still coming in, and they are great questions. If we consider answering them for their own. So the most upvoted now is from Sally. Have any of our panelists had ever had issues with the imposter syndrome, and if so, how did you overcome it?
Oh wow, yes is the only simplest way to say that. Man. So that role that I took way back in like 2000 in that first stage, I was in my early 20s, and I had a brilliant director that threw me into a project that I was suddenly working with Microsoft and their innovation team, and I was working with a local SME. We were doing all this incredible kind of cutting edge technology. And honestly, I've never been more stressed in my entire life in going through that project, just constantly feeling like, what the heck am I doing here? You know, and so I would walk into these meetings and so forth, and I'm the project manager and everyone's kind of looking at me for these decisions and I'm thinking, oh my God. Look, I think it's such a common thing to feel like that. And I think it goes back a bit to that whole not liking to be described as an expert. You know, there is this thing where you're sort of in this fear that I don't know everything I'm supposed to know, and people are looking to me for decisions and what have you in there. How you overcome it is just to not let it overwhelm you, I think is the most important thing. You know, a good trick that I read in a book once is actually to write, like in your notebook, on a sticky note or what have you, like 5 things about you and what you do in your job that you do really, really well. And you know that you've totally got that. And you can be confident in that, and you keep that in the front of your notebook. And then when you're having those moments where you feel like you shouldn't be there, just being able to flip to that and go, no, these are things that I know, I'm good at this, helps you to kind of build that confidence back in that moment, that there are things that you're really good at. So I think you've got to look for some of those little tools in there. But I think honestly, it's something that I think, male or female, I reckon everybody experiences that at some point in their careers in what they do.
Yeah, go ahead, Stephen.
No, I just second that. I was the director of a team of about 45 people, and my boss told me I was a management trainee, which was a huge hit to my ego. And it made me start to record all the successes that I'd done so that I could go back. And he'd actually done that on purpose so I would do it. But at the time I didn't know that, and it really, really annoyed me. And I know now there's actually something on Pinterest where you can pin your proudest moments and praise that you've received from colleagues and bosses, and keep that going. And there's a kind of a community discussing that. So getting into communities where, you know, you've got peers or people who are trying to do similar things, I think that can be really helpful too.
Yeah, and I think as Denise was kind of saying about like 5 things you know you're good at, like I guess most of the situations you're there for a reason. You've been asked to be there, or you've been there because you've done something right to get there. I think there's probably, unless something's gone very wrong, you see the situation. What was the one with the guy that wandered onto the BBC News set and got interviewed for the wrong thing? Like, some of those things happen, but generally they're very few and far between. You're usually in the right place at the right time for a reason, I think. The time is flying past, so I really want to talk about teams, because that has come up in various questions and also in the poll, about kind of leading teams, leading your first team perhaps, or stepping into a new leadership role. Rahini, have you got something that you perhaps want to share about like working that kind of team environment and having to kind of show your confidence there?
Yeah, absolutely, and that relates to the first question on the screen now on how to kind of get your voice when the room is filled with other voices, especially in a new environment. It's not it's always common that you will find people from several different backgrounds, several different countries, languages, cultures, and so on. And one of the things I found challenging is I also looked at it, so I literally look small. So that gave me also this lack of confidence in the beginning, saying, okay, I'm going to lead this team and I have to conduct myself to it. And that relates to the imposter syndrome as well. When I got an invite to talk at this panel, I had that moment when I questioned myself, should I be the person talking about confidence? So I already questioned myself. So I never literally overcome this, but I learned to live with it. So the main trick I could use was to identify you're questioning that. And then I have this conversation with myself. I would debate it out saying, okay, you have had these challenges and you somehow found the way to navigate it, and that's the way you will try to talk about. And just on the leadership role, the biggest weapon, if I may say, I have is to build relationships. So I would take my time out and have dedicated time scheduled across my calendar for each and individual member of my team, peers, colleagues, you know, people working for me, with me, everybody, and have a chat, just a chat about nothing. It could just be asking them, so do you have any feedback for me, or actively going and asking people who are working for you to give you feedback on what they think, and have these relationship and trust building really, really helps. And one-on-one is easy to do.
Yeah, I guess like I can kind of touches a little bit on one of the questions there about gauging your abilities and finding your confidence in that next role, and perhaps like a leadership role. Esther, did you have anything you wanted to add about kind of, I guess, stepping up or taking that next step, or perhaps even a side step, I guess you've taken a little bit in your career path?
Yes, so getting promoted or having to lead a team is a scary step, I can assure you. the few times I've had to do that over my career, because you get to lead people who are way older than you, who think you know less than they do. That's a very scary thing to do. But I think one thing I tell myself to help boost my confidence is, if you've been trusted with that role, then it means you have the potential to do it. Then it means whomever it is, either the owner of the company or your supervisor, knows and believes that you can do it. So that's why you've been put in that role. If you were not trusted to do it, you wouldn't be handed the role in the first place. Then there's something I also learned early on in my career. It's called color energies. So it's like personality strengths, so to speak. So it's something, it's like knowing how to gauge who on your team has what color energy. Different people have different energies. Some people are introverted, some people are extroverted, some people know how to receive feedback in a mild, comforting way, while some people are short, sharp, sweet, they want to get straight to the point. So it's knowing who on your team has what. Like Rohini said, it'll help you build those kinds of relationships with them, knowing that you can't give everybody the same feedback bilaterally. And you can also assume, you can make them know that, or you can make them know that you know everything. You have to be humble enough to receive the feedback and know that, yes, whilst you're the leader of the team, you don't know everything. You're relying on them to give you the support to lead. So that's something that's it really pushes you forward if you have to lead a team.
I think in the last kind of few minutes we've got actually another poll, Alina, if you're able to put it live, just about how people are finding kind of ways that support them in their confidence. Denise, I don't know if you want to pick up on how, I mean, I guess how can managers or mentors, like what are the things that we can do to support our teams become more confident and grow into roles and see them be really active in geospatial in our community?
So I think to pick up a little bit actually on what Esther just said about, you know, the colors of different people. One of the first things I think I would say is, like, not everybody has to be a public speaker. Not everybody has to actually be on a career progression that means that you're always going, you know, in this sort of theoretical up. I think actually, you know, when you're a really good leader or you're a really good mentor, actually what you're doing is helping people find the potential that they have and the sort of potential that's going to make them feel fulfilled and be able to, you know, really add value to either your team or your organization. So taking, you know, as Rohini said, taking that time to understand your, you know, your mentee or your staff that you've got there is so incredibly important, and to recognize that they're not you. So you can't send them on the same pathway that you've been on. You can't take what your success, you know, looks like and say that's what their success should be. You know, what you need to do is help them find the tools to find what success is for them. And I think, you know, one of my kind of realizations in, I think, the last couple of years where I've had the privilege to mentor some amazing people, is to understand too that we seem to have this perception that success is this sort of upwards thing where you have to always be heading towards some top position in an organization. I'm not sure that that's a healthy way to look at things. You know, I think success can come in a whole variety of different forms. So I think if we're going to really help and support people, what we need to be doing is really perhaps redefine what we mean by success and look more at kind of some of those values of what people have. You know, what's actually going to make them happy, what's going to make them want to learn more, those sorts of aspects. And I think if you can do that, then you'll get great people working in your organization. I think Abby might have frozen, so Stephen, go.
Yeah, so I was just going to add, I mean, there's a lot of talk about mentors, and this is a made-up word, but I'd also talk about ventors. Through my career, I've had a lot of people who I can go to that I trust implicitly, and I can let off steam. And that's not my mentor, that's not my boss, that's someone who knows me. You know, quite often it's colleagues, and they give me confidence because they're a good friend. And so I think it's important to have mentors, yes, but also these ventors, these other people who you listen to them, but they listen to you. I think that's really, really important. I think it's actually probably underrated how much, because we all have really tough days, long hours, challenging deadlines, this thing, you know, you were talking about measures of success. All of these things are really, really tough. So you do need to have a way to release, and it has to be someone who understands what you're talking about. So you can go home to a partner, but they're like, this is gobbledygook. What are you telling me? So I think for me, having someone to vent to is as important as having a mentor as well.
Thank you both. Yes, thank you both. I see Abigail might have some problems on connection. So this was the last poll we had, and as a closure, because I'm conscious of time, as a closure of this, I'm launching another poll as just to know your key learnings of those who have attended today. Just type in a word, and this will form up a cloud with on Abby doesn't show up. It will form up a cloud of all the words you guys have took from all this, the entire discussion today. And I would like to thank our panelists if they have any last advice they would like to give us. Please, let's have again a round of table. So Esther, would you like to start as your last advice?
Yes. So in addition to what Stephen said about having vendors, that's a new word. Thank you very much. I just learned that, even though I do it, but it's a good word. So thank you. I'll say there's also the relevance for community, right? It's so underrated. So we have like a lot of us went through school, especially the women amongst us who studied GIS. We were probably in the 5% of our class, or even in our workspaces. We have 10 male colleagues and just 2 people in the department or in the entire office and stuff like that. So there's that need for having a community where you can go back to for other people who are like you, who do what you do. So take, for instance, Women in Geospatial Plus, African Women in GIS, Women in GIS organizations around the country. There are lots of these kinds of groups. So I think if a lot of people can tap into them more actively, it would help boost a lot of confidence, because it's like a safe space to ask questions, get advice, seek for help. So if you're struggling at work, you can go to your community to ask, oh, who has done something like this before? Can you help? So community is somewhere we will have to latch into quite strongly. And thank you very much again, Alina, for having me. Thank you.
Yes, very, very much. It's been a pleasure, and thank you for accepting our invitation. Yes, Denise?
Me, look, I think the point that I'd love to leave everybody with is that concept of defining success for yourself. You know, I think we live in this amazing world of media, of all of these images, you know, and I've just finished like Michelle Obama's book on becoming, and, you know, so I think we always have these incredible, almost ethereal role models kind of up in front of us all the time. And I think we need to just be careful not to be measuring ourselves against these kind of media created personalities. So I think for that confidence thing to really happen, go out and define what success is for you, and then kind of, you know, own that and pursue that the way you want to do it, would be what I would say.
Yes, good advice. Thank you, Denise, very much, and thank you for accepting our invitation. And I have to say that we have so many other questions on Slido that will give us material for another webinar for sure on this topic. Thank you so much. Rohini?
If I have to leave everyone with two set of advices on how to build confidence, one is don't be afraid to take risks. I always tell people, have the courage to quit if you are in a negative space or you don't have that space to grow and build your confidence, because that is one big pushback to the single step you can take towards building confidence. And the second thing is never stop learning. I think that gives you the biggest confidence of all. Like, always be a learner, especially in this field, which grows insanely fast. Every 6 months there is a new thing out. Always keep yourself in loop and keep learning. That will automatically give you the confidence that you need. So yep, go out there and do the best you can. Thank you.
Thank you, Rohini, and as well, thank you for accepting the invitation. And we'll close with Stephen.
So I'd probably echo what Rohini just said. I'd say step out of your comfort zone. I'd also say, look, geospatial, GIS, Earth observations, all of these things are actually really quite complicated. They're quite complex. You've done the hard work to get this far, to get your qualifications, to get into the job market, research, whatever you're doing. The step I see people often miss is the additional homework that's needed. If you're applying for a job, don't just look at the front page of the website. Look at the business plan. Look at the strategic plan. Look at what are the long-term goals. How can you fit into that? How can you support that? The same if you're giving a presentation. You know, why are people coming to the event? What's the headline of the event? How do you fit your talk around all of that? You're all smart people, but you just need to do that extra step and do that extra homework, and you will stand out and you will feel more confident because you will have more information at your fingertips.
Thank you. And I see also Abby just rejoined us.
I couldn't get back in, but I was just listening because it was so brilliant. So it sounds like we've just about done the wrap up, Alina.
Exactly, Abby. So I've asked everyone for the last thought, and also we'll close down the word cloud poll. Let's see if we can deactivate and see the results of this.
I think my screen locked, so I think what you're seeing I don't have control over now. So, but I guess everyone can see on their own Slido.
Yes, they should see it. More than 64 words there saying that there. My own version of success, so everyone can find their way towards the confidence as well. Community is one of the most voted words as well. Confidence, trust, venture and community, leadership, self-esteem. So from all of this, I'm gonna create a cloud of words and I will publish it on Maplines.
Well, I think it sounds like we're ready to wrap up then. So I heard you thanking everybody anyway, Alina. So thanks everyone for joining, and thank you for all of the amazing questions and the participation online as well. I know that Women in Geospatial will be publishing like a summary of the webinar, and we'll make the recording available too. So thanks, and have a lovely afternoon, everybody.
Thanks everyone.